Okay. And the jury's heard that for a while, Juan was locked up. What was that like for you?
It was really hard. My Uncle Juan is like the only really like constant male figure in my life. So, you know, it wasn't fun when he was away, but he always was like, whenever he came back, he was like, I'm gonna make it up to you. And then we did like, you know, stuff that we didn't really get to do as much when he wasn't there, because he would be like, oh, I'm taking all the kids out, and like we don't get to do that every day. So
Okay. So what kind of stuff would you do that was different than every day?
mostly we would go out to eat, which is kind of cliche, but like everyone's favorite thing to do. Because it would be all of us, like my uncle and my mom and my aunt and like all of the kids, which is kind of a lot of kids to get together in one place and sit down. But it was so fun because we got to pick out whatever we wanted to, and like dessert was never off the table, and we don't really get dessert a lot, so it was fun when you're, you know, a little bit younger than I am now.
You mentioned that there's a lot of you. So how many people are in your family?
In my family, I have a brother and a sister, so there's 3 of us.
Okay.
And then my aunt has 4 kids now, and then one of her kids has a son.
Okay. Okay. So there's the three of you guys, and then 4, and then and then a 5th, a son. Okay. And then of course there's your parents too.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So when Juan was locked up, how would you stay in touch with him?
He calls me a lot. Kind of like lately, since I started college, it's been a lot more because my phone is like on more than it had been in the past. So really just phone calls. We went to visit him a lot more than when I stopped living like at home during most of the year. But we like made trips to go see him, and it would be like a day trip kind of thing.
Okay. So where would the trips, how far away was he locked? And let me ask, how long ago do you mean when you take a day trip to go see him?
Like it would be when I was in high school. So like not really that long ago, like 3 years ago, and then going back a little bit. And the trips like kind of felt long to me, but they weren't really that long, probably like an hour, 2 hours drive, maybe a little more than that, but I was never driving, so I don't know if that's accurate.
Okay. And so how many people would go on the trips?
I'm going to say 5, because that's how many people you can normally fit in a car.
Okay. Okay. And when you got there, what was it like visiting your uncle when he was incarcerated?
It was happy and sad. Like I was really happy to see him. And we would like alternate the kids that went. Like if these kids go this week, then the next other kids get to go the next week, so that everybody gets to see him. But it was also like sad, you weren't all the time like allowed to give him a hug or a kiss or anything, and so it was really hard to like have to be separated by a table away from him. That was sad, but at the same time it was worth being able to go and see him in person.
So you mentioned that recently he can reach you more often, I'm guessing because your schedule is a little more flexible in college than in high school?
Yeah.
What kind of stuff do you talk about?
Most of the time we usually talk about school first, like how are your grades, what's going on, do you have a boyfriend, all the like super like important stuff. And then we just kind of like usually start to talk about everyone else in the family, like what's going on. Do you have any fun things planned? It's really, honestly, it's mostly about me, and I do most of the talking just because he asks a lot of questions about me. But they're short conversations because we don't get to have that long, but they're always very like meaningful, if that makes sense.
So What is it about your uncle that you love so much? What makes you love him?
There's a lot of things. He's my favorite uncle, even though I only have one. But the biggest thing for me personally is that he is so supportive of me. I'm a theater major, and lots of people have zero respect for the arts, and I'm always like being asked like, oh, when are you going to change your major to something real? But I can like 100% say that my Uncle Juan has never asked me anything like that. He's never put me down for what I want to go to school for, and he's always extremely supportive of that and of me as a person and my growing. And just like every time we end a conversation, it ends with take care of your family. Like that's what this family is about. We love each other so much, and we go through rough patches, but at the end of the day, that's what he cares about is us, and we care about him. So, yeah.
Is there anything else you want the jury to know about Uncle Juan, Dr. Juan?
I just want to say that I love my Uncle Juan, and I've lived many, many days without him, and I would like to have more time with him. So while it is important that we, respect whatever is given, just please keep in mind that I'm the oldest one, so the younger ones definitely take it harder than me because they don't understand as much. But not being able to see him every day has definitely impacted me in a negative way, and I would just really love to be able to have more time with my uncle, especially as I'm growing up and turning into my own person. And, one day I'm going to have a family and stuff, and I want him to be a part of it. So if you could just please keep that in mind.
Thank you, Deja. They might have some more questions for you.
Thank you, Mary. You may step down. Be careful if that's different. And your witness is here.
Yes, Judge, thank you. Joseph Crabtree. Crabtree.
You swear or affirm the testimony you give here today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
All right, careful as you step.
Good afternoon, sir. Could you introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Joseph Crabtree.
And Mr. Crabtree, how are you employed? What's your current job title?
I work for the Department of Juvenile Justice. My current title is a specialist for the Department of Juvenile Justice.
How long have you worked for the Department of Juvenile Justice?
I'm in my 13th year
Where's your office located?
in Madison County, Kentucky, Richmond.
Okay. What is the Department of Juvenile Justice? What's its purpose?
The Department of Juvenile Justice is the agency that is tasked for preparing dispositional reports and investigations to the Court on Juveniles, making recommendations to district judges with regards to sentencing, for lack of a better term, for juveniles, what happens to them when they commit offenses as juveniles. And then we also are tasked with providing treatment, residential, any number of other things with juveniles that are involved in the court system.
Okay. Over the period of time that you have worked for them, what are the different roles that you have fulfilled?
I've been, all 13 years I've been a community worker in some fashion.
What's the difference between DJJ, the Department of Juvenile Justice, and Child Protective Services?
Child Protective Services deals with children that are in the court system through no fault of their own. DJJ only handles public offenses, which is when somebody under the age of 18 commits a crime. That is a crime no matter how old you are, whether you're 15 or 50.
So like stealing or assault or something like that?
Correct. Like truancy, if you're not going to school, is a cabinet issue. We would not deal with that because it's only legal because you're a juvenile.
Those are all status offenses?
Correct.
You guys deal with public offenses?
Correct.
Meaning crimes no matter your age?
Correct.
Okay. Was DJJ originally set up to run akin to CPS?
We were formed out of them as a department. We did used to be part of the community-based services until about, I think, 1996 is when we were formed as a department.
Okay. Do you recall working with Quincinio Canyon?
I did.
When was that?
That would have been probably the summer of 2006 until about December of 2006.
Okay. Before you met him in person, did you happen to see a photo of him?
I did.
Okay. I'll show you that. Okay, is this the photo that you saw? I'm going to put it here so everybody can take a look at it. Is that the photo that you saw?
Correct.
Okay, so that was in, looks like 2004 on there.
That was when it was uploaded. I can't guarantee that's when it was taken.
Okay. But this is around the time that you came to work with Quincinio?
I would have had him a couple of years after that.
Okay. So this was before you came to work?
Correct.
Okay. You didn't take this photo?
I did not.
Okay. Do you know who did?
I believe it was Marcellus Reed.
And who is that person?
He was his worker at that time.
Okay. How is a photo like this used within the Department of Juvenile Justice?
We use them as identifiers in the event somebody goes AWOL. We always take a picture when someone comes into our system.
And so the department takes pictures periodically, updates this?
Correct.
Okay, so this is one in a line of pictures?
Yes, this is the first.
This was the first one? Okay. Do you remember what you thought when you saw that photo?
I thought he was heavily medicated, was my first thought.
Is this a typical photo of a child entering the system?
No.
Why not?
Typically, what sets us apart is A, it's not a detention photo, and someone would not appear that way in an office setting. Like if I was meeting them for the first time and they had come into my office, they would not appear that way. If my memory serves correctly, he was at that time, was then called Tenbrook, now it's called the Brook Hospital in Louisville.
Okay. When you were assigned to Quincinio, what was your role and responsibility with him?
I was his case manager, or his juvenile probation officer, however you.
Okay, tell the jury a little bit about what a case manager does for a child.
Essentially, we will assume case responsibility for anything going on with Quincinio. We would have made a case plan, a treatment plan. We would assess his risk to reoffend, made recommendations to the judge with whatever current charge was pending within the court. I think at this time, what we were helping the court work through was he, at that time, had been found not competent to stand trial, which is why there's a gap between when that picture was taken and when he came into our system officially, because it took almost a year, if I remember, for him to be competent to stand trial.
Okay. Did Quincinio have other workers before you were assigned to him?
Yes.
I think we mentioned this.
Marcellus, correct.
Okay. Was he the only one?
Yes, I believe so.
So you were his second worker?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember the major challenges that Quincinio was facing at the time?
When I came in contact with him, we were talking about, he was already placed at Frenchburg Group Home. He had already been removed. We were talking about transitioning him home, how Quincinio should be successful if he applied his treatment to the community.
Okay. What was his relationship like with his mother, Juan?
At that time, she was engaged in treatment. We really wanted Quincinio home, was excited, thought he had learned what he needed to learn. I do remember personally doing the home evaluation with Quintilla and approving it.
How was Quincinio with her?
Now when he came home, that was kind of a different story. It started off going south pretty quickly once he returned home. They had frequent conflict with regards to rules and kind of the standard of Quintilla's expectation of behavior.
Okay, and I guess, could you tell me a little bit more about that when you play that last part?
Well, the conflict was, Miss Higgins or Quintilla would set rules and Quintilla would struggle to follow them, and then that's when the conflict would arise. And it was from anything as small as a room being clean or messy or laundry, or up until they were physically assaulting one another.
Okay. So it sounds like you had some amount of contact with Quintilla.
I did.
Okay. What were your interactions like?
Quintilla struggled with how to handle a difficult child, that's for sure. I know that prior to our involvement, I remember him being out of care or in care with social services for some other things that Ms. Higgins was dealing with. And she often mentioned that, which is why I bring it up now, because that was kind of how she applied her expectation for Quincenio. As I went through all of these things, I learned these skills, and I'm trying to apply them, and he's not helping me. It was a great source of conflict between the two of them.
Do you recall Ms. Higgins would make requests of you?
Sure.
Okay. And what kind of requests were they?
On several occasions, she would kind of be done with Quincenio, didn't want him to return home. At one point, I did have to put him in an emergency shelter.
And that was because of her question?
She refused to let him come home, correct. They had had an argument. I can't remember the context of the fight that particular time, but they had assaulted one another and he couldn't return home.
Okay. So it sounds like you feel she was struggling to parent.
Sure, yeah.
So we've heard a little bit about it. What kind of resources, services, or plans were put in place to try and help Quintilla?
Well, and a lot of that had already been addressed by DCBS before he came to us with regards to parenting classes. I do know that Quintilla herself was still in services herself, like counseling. She was also receiving medication treatment herself for some of her own issues. Those things, what I would try and work with Quintilla was just kind of different approaches about how to handle Quincenio, about maybe the expectation is a little unreasonable with where he's at. Which is always a fine line because, obviously she is his mother and she has a right to set rules in her own home. But, sometimes if the argument is over whether or not the room is clean, then maybe let's settle middle ground on one day a week that gets done, or, those kinds of things we would spend a lot of time talking about.
Okay. What kinds of challenges do you think that Quintilla is facing herself?
She did struggle with depression a lot. She had a lot of anxiety. There were times where I think medication was helpful and beneficial for her, and I think sometimes she had issues getting her medication on time. If I remember correctly, I can't guarantee that, but certainly there was times where the medication didn't appear to be. She would have to go back. I do remember her talking about going and getting it adjusted when things were too stressful or lots of things were going on. Whether it be with her job or nosy coworkers or something going on where she had to go and she did have her own organic issues. I do remember her being hospitalized herself at least once at Eastern State before he came into our care.
Okay. Do you remember, do you recall a time where you were called because Quincenio ran away as they were headed to the Ridge?
Yes.
Okay. What is the Ridge?
It is a adolescent hospital. Well, they have a couple of units for adolescents, hospital here in Fayette County, excuse me, where they deal with acute care kids, kids who are suicidal. They deal with kids with substance abuse issues. I think at that time the trip to the Ridge was because she'd found some marijuana in his room, if I recall correctly.
Do you remember an incident where Quincenio left school over having no shoes?
It wasn't that he didn't have shoes. He had worn a pair of shoes that he was instructed not to wear.
Okay.
And so Ms. Higgins went to the school and had him remove them. She was going to, I think they were his stepfather's, if my memory serves, and he wasn't supposed to wear them. And he did. So, of course, she didn't bring replacement shoes, so Quincenio did run off from school that day.
So then how were you involved?
The school called me when he took off.
recall Ms. Higgins calling the police on Quincy?
Not a specific incident, but I do believe she did.
Did you ever see any marks? Did you ever see any type of physical injuries to Quincy?
The one time I did put him in an emergency shelter, which is therapeutic foster care. Yeah, he had scratches on his face from an altercation. They had gotten into it with one another.
Other than Quincinio's relationship with Quintella, did you have knowledge of Quincinio's relationship with other family members or possibly men in his life or anything like that?
I did not.
Were you made aware that Quincinio had experienced loss and seen violence in his home from a young age?
Yes.
Were you aware that his father was murdered?
Yes.
Were any of the interventions that were offered to him geared towards treatment of trauma or grief or anything like that?
Now, at that time, a lot of that research hadn't come out yet. We were unaware of kind of the extreme effect that trauma has on most kids. No, we didn't. We did not have a specific trauma protocol at that time as a department, no.
So I heard you say at that time a few times. Has that changed?
Yes, we do now. We have a specific referral process and a service that has to be completed for a kid that has a trauma history.
How would you describe Quincinio's personality back when you were working with him?
He had a fairly flat affect. He was fairly resigned to how things were. I had lots of conversations with Ms. Higgins. I don't remember any lengthy conversations with Quincinio himself. He was often very stoic and would sit there and just, whatever we were doing, that's what we were doing.
So since Quincinio came into the BJJ system, I guess from young and very young, do you believe that he was able to be raised in a nurturing environment, especially for the issues that he was facing?
I would not go that far. Not by any means.
Are you aware of his recent history?
I am.
Could you describe that a little bit to the jury, where he went?
I would say from the time he came into care to the time he aged out, when he turned 18, he was in almost every placement we had as available as an agency. He was at Frenchburg when I got him. I think he went to Lincoln Village at one point, which is a youth development center, which is a step up from a group home. I think he went to Green River YMTC, which is another youth development center. I think at one point he was at maybe Woods Bend Youth Development Center. I think he probably spent more time in custody than out as a juvenile.
He spent more time in custody than out?
I haven't looked at the dates, but that would, from his placement history, I would imagine that's a fair description of that.
And is it fair to say that it was rather consistent from about then until 18?
Correct. He would complete treatment, come home, things would fall apart, and then he would have to go back to treatment.
So he'd come home and then he'd go somewhere, and he'd come home, then he'd go somewhere else, come home and go somewhere else.
Yeah. I do believe, though, he was always returned to Quintella.
Do you believe that?
He was always returned home to Quintella.
Gotcha. What was the final thing you did on Quincinio's case before you transferred him down to Richmond?
I recommended commitment, that Quincinio be recommitted to the Department of Juvenile Justice.
And what does that mean to be committed as a child in BJJ?
You are removed from your parents' home and you are placed in a treatment facility of the department's choosing.
And that was your recommendation?
It was.
And that's what happened?
It did.
Why did you leave the Lexington office and transfer to the Richmond office?
For me, when I left the Fayette County office, I had 18 kids on my caseload and 18 kids in placement with the department. Every kid I had was committed and in placement. I did not believe that I was being effective. I thought maybe it might have had something to do with the population. It was more urban than what I was used to. Because I'm from a teeny tiny little town in western Kentucky. So when a position became available in Richmond, I transferred down.
Our commitments, would you say they're less or more frequent now than they were 14 years ago when Quincy was coming through the system?
Significantly less,
Significantly less.
yes.
Okay. Why has that changed like that? What's happening?
Essentially, we've become aware of a lot more effective research and effective strategies to deal with kids in the community. The law changed on eligibility. You had to be eligible and have to have a certain kind of legal history to be committed, whereas 12 years ago, if you got caught with a joint at school or anywhere, you could, in theory, and some kids did, end up removed from their home for that. Whereas as an adult, that's a $100 fine and you move on. Kids were spending a lot more time in custody on minor offenses than adult would. So the system corrected itself as best it could and has continued to improve, in my opinion. But we've made a lot of changes since then.
Do you think it's possible there would have been a different outcome if Quincy had been in, say, today's system instead of 14 years ago?
I think it's only a matter of fact to say that he would not have been eligible for commitment until further along. He would have had to at least had 4 adjudications to be eligible to have been committed, and I think he was committed on a probation violation initially, on maybe a terroristic threatening. I can't remember. I don't believe he had the legal history at that time to have been committed. So whether or not it would have ended up any different, I can't say, but I can certainly say he would not have been committed when he was committed.
If you had continued on Quincy's case, where would you have recommended he be placed when it came to a family placement, and why?
If there was a family option available, I would have certainly fleshed that out if it was a possibility. If it wasn't, and I believe my recommendation when I left was for him not to return to Miss Higgins, simply because they just don't get along. She's not doing anything. It's not abuse. She's certainly not a bad mother in that regards, but if you know it's not going to be successful, in my book, the definition of insanity is, trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. So.
Finally, Mr. Crabtree, how did you learn Quincy was facing a capital case in Bacon?
Your investigator called.
Okay. What thoughts went through your mind?
I just regret.
You surprised to see him in this circumstance?
No.
Do you believe a person who aged out of DJJ can be rehabilitated?
Depends on the context, but sure.
Do you think in this context, do you think Quincy can be?
I think with kids that don't learn it the first time, if you find that you have to continually remove a kid, that they're not getting if they're not getting the message or whatever they need in treatment, they kind of overwhelmingly, if you look at the statistics, end up in the adult system.
So, with his history.
Yeah, that's why I said when you're asked if I'm surprised, the answer is no. Well, not with his history.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Move to introduce defendants. I believe it's you. Indictments. So I did mark it. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. They may have a couple questions
Sure.
for you. Just hang on.
That's all the questions I have.
Any questions, Ms. Kendall, Ms. Reed?
No, Your Honor.
No questions? Thank you, Mr. Crabtree. You can step down and return to your duties.
Thank you.
Judge, the defense rests.
Okay. Counsel for Mulazim, may call your next witness.
Your Honor, we were called Liana Garner.
Liana Gardner. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give here today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Liana Garner.
Put your chair up, that black box is in my book.
Okay. And how do you know Juan Mulazim?
He is my uncle on my mother's side.
Okay, so we met Deja a little bit ago. Who's Deja?
She's my sister, my older sister.
Okay. So how old are you, Niana?
I am 15 years old.
Okay. And where do you live now?
I have recently moved with my mother to Richmond, Virginia,
Okay. And before you moved to Richmond, where were you living?
here in Lexington.
Where were you going to school?
STEAM Academy.
Okay. And did you do any extracurriculars in school or anything like that?
I did. I participated in a small color guard course, a steel pan, and step team at Tate's Creek.
Okay. So, you said you're 15 now, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the jury has heard that when you were younger, your uncle was locked up for a while. What was it like for you having your uncle locked up?
When my uncle was locked up, we would go visit him a lot. We would always, like, it would be a day trip. I don't know where he was current at that time, but we would all take a nice family trip down to see him. I'm sorry. It didn't really feel like he was locked up because of how often we saw him and how often he contacted us and kept in touch.
I'm a little bit nervous today.
Yeah.
It's okay. Okay. So when you went to visit him, is it like on TV where you guys are on one side of the table and he's on the other, or what was it like?
Yeah, it was like, it was always like we would always just be right around a table and talk to him, only for a couple of hours. We would visit him a lot, but like, we visit him a lot, but it wasn't like, I don't know how to explain it, I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. The jury heard that in the spring of 2013, Juan came home. What was it like? What was it like having him home?
When he was home, we spent a lot of time with him, a lot more time when he was obviously in jail. He would always make sure that like we all had our individual time with him as well as family time. When he was out, I remember this one time that I had wanted a CD from Walmart. It was a One Direction CD.
Okay. Okay.
And he took me there and he got it. But I just wanted the one CD. But he ended up buying me like 5 other things just because he loved me. So sorry.
It's okay. And that was something that, it was just the two of you doing that. And he kind of surprised you with those extra things. Okay. Now, the jury's heard that he's been locked up for a little while now. How do you stay in touch with him?
For like calling, he calls us anytime he can. That's about it.
Okay.
So,
When he calls, do you talk to him?
Sometimes, yes, I do. That's fine.
What do you guys talk about?
School, checks up on how I'm doing. He makes sure that I stay on top of my grades in school. He makes sure that I'm doing okay. Sometimes we talk about our family dog, and she makes sure that she's doing okay too.
What's your dog's name?
Her name is Tonks, like a character in Harry Potter.
Tonks? Okay. Okay. It's pretty clear you love your uncle very much. What do you love about him?
I love that he's always so positive, and he's always so considerate of everybody else, and he's always making sure that we're okay. He's always been a kind person. I've never knew him to be anyone else, and I love that. He can be funny. He can always crack jokes when you're feeling down. And I love that he has so much love for everybody in his family all the time.
Those are all the questions I have for you, but some of the other lawyers may have questions. Okay.
Sorry.
No question? Thank you, ma'am. You guys got to be careful of this stuff. How are you next witness?
Your Honor, if I could call Juan Garner.
Juan Garner.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give here today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, sir? You're going to have to sit on the witness stand. Be careful of the staff.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Raekwon Benton.
And what is your full name?
Raekwon Lewis Dewan Benson.
And how are you related to Juan Mulazim?
He is my uncle.
Okay. We just met Deja and Niana. Are those your sisters?
Yes.
Okay. And how old are you?
19.
And so you're 19. Are you working or in school?
I go to the University of Louisville.
What are you studying there?
Biology.
And what grade are you going to be starting in the fall?
I will be a sophomore.
All right. So Deja walked us a little bit through all of your cousins in the family. So sounds to me like you're the only boy.
Pretty much.
How does it feel to be the only boy in your among your sisters and with your cousins?
It's a lot, but also I get a lot of privileges because of that too.
so I don't really mind all the extra hard work I have to put in.
What kind of hard work?
To give like just a recent example, like my mom got a job in Virginia, and so she was moving, and my granny, instead of staying in the apartment that she lives in, she moved into our house, and we had some help moving everything, but I still ended up doing a whole lot of the work, just getting all of the old stuff out of the house that we weren't keeping and moving everything new in, and that took like, getting all the big stuff moved took like 3 days, and then all the smaller stuff has been basically over the course of the whole summer since I've been back from school.
So it's a lot of helping. Okay. And we met your sisters, we heard about your cousins. Do you have, other than Juan, do you have other uncles around?
No.
So we have heard that, the jury has heard that Juan was locked up from about 2000, for about when you would have been a younger child, 2007 to 2013. What was it like having an uncle who was incarcerated?
I didn't really know any different than him being incarcerated, so I wouldn't really know what to expect differently if he wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
But it just seemed like normal to me because we went and visited him all the time.
Okay. Did you enjoy those visits?
The majority of the time, yes.
Okay. What made them enjoyable?
I really like long car rides because like I can sleep in the car and nobody will bother me. But also, like just having basically what felt like the whole family, like being able to like sit around the table and like just hang out and talk, and we would laugh and play with each other and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't really, like it didn't feel like he was being kept away from us because we got to see him pretty much all the time. And like sometimes wherever, depending on where he was at, we would get to go outside and take pictures and stuff with him, and we enjoyed that too.
The jury's heard that Juan came home in about the spring of 2013. How old were you then?
I would have been 14, just turned 14 earlier that year.
Okay. And do you have a nickname, or what do you call your uncle?
Uncle Juan.
Okay. So when Uncle Juan was home then, what sort of things would you do together?
He was the person that originally introduced me to working out because I'd never really lifted weights or anything before that. And we would go get food, which is always great because, you know, food is life.
How often would you go work out?
It just depended on whatever he was doing because I usually was free a whole lot of the time, especially like during the summer. I didn't have anything else to do because I wasn't working or anything at the time because I wasn't quite old enough yet for all that. So it would be like maybe once or twice a week, just depending on what he was doing. And occasionally we went over to his house and just hung out.
You said that that Juan's basically your only uncle. What did it mean to you having a man around to spend time with when you were 14, 15 years old?
It was, I enjoyed it. It was definitely different because being around all girls all the time, they don't always or usually ever actually like to do all the things that I like to do. And honestly, like once you hang around like the same group of people for a certain amount of time, like you get sick of them, especially with them because, you know, sometimes your family wears on you, and they do.
Okay. You mentioned that Uncle Juan taught you how to work out.
Yes.
Was there anything you taught him?
Well, he really did not know how to use a cell phone at that point. And I don't know if you've ever seen someone that's like getting, you know, on in their age, not know how to use their phone. But he would like hold the phone like this, trying to talk into the microphone. And I was just like, all you have to do is hold it. Like the microphone will pick up anything you're trying to say. You don't have to yell into their ear like that. It wasn't really that serious.
Now, the jury knows that Juan has been locked up for a little while. How do you stay in touch with him now that he's incarcerated?
He calls me, just depending on, because I'm really bad about answering the phone sometimes, but we talk on the phone a lot. And whenever I'm with my granny or my mom, whenever they talk to him, they always let us know that he's like, you know, just letting us know that he was thinking about us and that he loves us. And when I was in school, he called me every so often, just checking up on me, making sure I was all right, seeing how I was doing, helping to encourage me, because being away from home like that for the first time really was kind of stressful.
Okay. Because you went to the University of Louisville.
Right.
So that's away from Lexington. What sort of things would Juan say to encourage you?
He told me to keep my head up and to remember that, like, no matter what, since, you know, he couldn't be around all the time, that it was up to me to, like, be there to take care of my granny, which is his mom, and my mom and my aunt, and make sure that everybody was all right and had everything that they needed. And that, you know, helps to motivate me, because it helps me remember what exactly it was that I was doing it for, which will make me work harder.
I don't have any more questions for you, but some of the other lawyers may, okay?
Sure.
And I'm sorry, your mom is your Uncle Juan's sister, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other two that we heard from, and I'm sorry, I think I get their name wrong, but Deja, is it Leona?
Niana.
Is she your little sister?
Yes.
Okay. Were you all raised here in Lexington?
Yes.
Where?
Where in Lexington?
Mm-hmm.
We used to live over, you know where the Lyric Theater is? Like right around the corner from there.
Okay.
And
Eastern Mexico.
yes.
Okay. And you actually, or you talked about Juan being a male influence for you. Did you have a male influence in your household growing up?
For a while, yes, but I wouldn't say that the influence that I had was necessarily the best influence.
But you were raised with your mom?
Yes.
And you're in college now?
Yes.
And your sister's in college now? That's all I have for you. Thank you. Thank you, sir. You may step down. Be careful to step. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it's time for a break. During this recess, please don't discuss this case among yourselves or form any opinions or conclusions about the matter until it's finally submitted to you. They said they need more than 10 minutes to go to the bathroom. I will give them about 15. When we return, we have 2 more witnesses to get through, and then I intend to finish this today, as long as you all stay with me. We do have instructions ready. And then they will do their closing arguments and we'll submit the case to you. Obviously, if it goes too late and you need to come back tomorrow, then I'll certainly honor that and make you